Chapter 20, The Story, Hanyu's POV. Hanyu was barely resettled in his painting pose when there was a knock at the door. Ah, Lord Antony set down his brush. Time for you to head up and get some sunshine. I could stay, Hanyu offered. Honestly, he thought some time above deck with the others sounded wonderful, but it felt wrong to interrupt the god's painting. Nonsense, Antony huffed. You missed the last one. Go ahead and get changed. I'll tell the attendant to wait for you. When Hanyu emerged from his little closet and crossed to the doorway, he found a supremely uncomfortable Bunta casting nervous little glances at Antony, who was holding forth. It just doesn't seem healthy, the god was saying. Don't you think? Bunta looked miserable. I would not question the wisdom of the gods, my lord. But that's what I'm saying. Antony waved a hand and Bunta flinched back, cowering visibly. I never ordered it. I'm going to ask Claudia and Titus, but it doesn't seem like it's something they would do either. I'm ready, Hanyu piped up, and Bunta turned to him with grateful eyes. I'll see you later, Hanyu. Antony turned, then hesitated and looked back at Bunta. Don't leave his side, all right? Of course, my lord. Bunta bowed low, and Hanyu stepped through the door to join him. Once they were several yards down the corridor, Bunta exhaled hard. He wants me to ask Lord Julia if it's unhealthy to keep the boys in the temple from sex and relationships, he moaned. Will she be angry? Hanyu asked. He would hate to see Bunta torn between obeying the Lord of the Gods and his own master. Oh, goodness, no, Bunta said. But I'm still confused. Where did this come from? We were talking this morning, and I guess he hasn't known about the restriction. Hanyu shrugged. It seems to be bothering him a lot. Bunta sighed. Even if it was unhealthy, I don't think changing the rules would be better. It would just mean heartbreak and a harder adjustment after they were claimed. Hanyu was inclined to agree, but it felt disloyal to do so. He changed the subject, and they talked of lighter things until they finally arrived at the meeting point. Everyone else was already there, and they were crowded around Kenta. Hanyu jogged over to see what the fuss was about. Hanyu, Jen greeted, waving him over. Kenta was just telling us about the woman raider that Lord Theodora has. Hanyu's interest was piqued. Really? What's she like? She was terrifying at first. Kenta was probably starting over, but he didn't betray any impatience. I'm sure she was scared to death herself, but I couldn't help being frightened by her. She just huddled down in a corner and glowered at all of us, and if anybody got close, she struck out. Whenever any of us tried to talk to her, she would just scream at us or turn her face to the wall and ignore us, even Lord Theodora. Wasn't Lord Theodora angry? Jen asked. Kenta shook his head. Not until 2 days ago. I was bringing the raider her supper when the ship rolled a little more than I'm used to, and I stumbled and dropped the tray. The plate broke, and quick as anything, she grabbed up the biggest shard, got her arm around me, and pressed it up to my throat. Hanyu gasped, as did the others, despite the fact that they were probably hearing this for the second time. Hiseo ran to get Lord Theodora, and she came storming in with her face like a thundercloud. Kenta shivered at the memory. That was scarier than being held hostage, honestly. Hanyu thought of the god's fearsome features and tried to picture her enraged. He couldn't fault Kenta's assessment. She shouted at Gyuri and Sergish, and Gyuri shouted back, and then faster than I could even see, she darted over to us, grabbed Gyuri's wrist, and twisted it until she dropped the shard. Then Lord Theodora pulled me away from Gyuri and fussed over me for a while, looking me over for wounds and things. She just turned her back to Gyuri like she wasn't any kind of threat. Judging from what Hanyu had seen Antony do, Gyuri wasn't a threat to one of the gods at all. He felt a pang of sympathy for the woman. She may have been a barely civilized Sergish brute, but she must have been terrified after trying and failing to take a hostage. In her place, he'd have been wondering, what did Lord Theodora do to her? Jen blurted. They must have moved past the part where the others had already heard. Nothing, Kenta said. Once she looked me over, she examined her wrist and sent Hiseo to get Lord Julia. Gyuri sat down and didn't fight when Lord Julia came to bandage her up. After that, she stopped striking and screaming at us. In fact, she spends all her time with me and Chihiro now, and this morning she came over and apologized to me. Lord Theodora must have taught her the Taishan words. He smiled. Honestly, I like her. Really? Hanyu couldn't imagine liking anyone who threatened to kill him, let alone a Sergish barbarian. There are at least a half a dozen savage tribes. or nations that lived in the desert and occasionally attacked Taisha, trying for a piece of their divinely defended fertile coastal land, but the Surgish were the most powerful and determined. When Hanyu was a child in the temple nurseries, the attendants had told them that if they weren't good, the gods wouldn't take them and then the Surgish would catch them. When his cadre was older, they had had play wars that lasted the whole day, and he'd been one of the few boys who liked to be a Surgish warrior because he got to scream and flail his arms as much as he wanted. Now, here was Kenta, who had always cried that the war games were too scary, saying that he liked a real live Surgish raider. Well, maybe the women were different from the men. Hanyu! He was yanked from his thoughts by Asau's voice. When he turned to look at his friend, he cringed. Asau looked even worse than he had before. His pallor had increased. He was moving with painful slowness. His eyes were sunken and bloodshot, and his lips were cracked. "Are you all right?" Hanyu blurted. Stupid, stupid, stupid. Why had he said that? He could clearly see that Asau was not all right. What had happened to him? Was he sick? Surely it wasn't... "I was actually going to ask after Lord Antony," Asau mumbled, glancing down. "I know my master was rough with him." "Ah, yes, the other night's altercation." "He's fine, of course," Hanyu assured him. "He looked terrible when he first got back, but it's healed so quickly. He's amazing. Well, all the gods are amazing, I suppose." Asau nodded eagerly, which soothed Hanyu's fears a bit. "What about Lord Marcus?" he asked. "Was he in rough shape as well?" "Oh, no," Asau said dismissively. "Not a mark on him when he said I could come back." "Come back?" "Lord Antony sent me to the kitchens before they started." Asau gave him a strained smile. "How have things been with Lord Antony, by the way?" "Wonderful!" Hanyu blurbled, feeling the grin stretch his cheeks uncontrollably. "He painted a portrait of me, and it was so lovely. But he said it didn't do me justice, so he's doing another. And he talks with me while he paints and asks me all kinds of things, and sometimes—" "Has he allowed you into his bed yet?" Asau interrupted. Hanyu's brain stopped for a moment in his surprise. It wasn't like Asau to cut him off, or to look so pinched and pissed. Hell, his friend had practically spat the question at him. "No," Hanyu managed after too long. "He hasn't." Strangest of all was the triumphant little smirk Asau threw at him, and the way his best friend turned and walked away, leaving Hanyu standing alone in the crowd of their cadre. Antony's POV. Antony found himself distracted and pacing once Hanyu left. His irrational feeling that the boy was in some kind of danger without him hadn't let up, and he hated to have him out of his sight. Finally, he forced himself into the seat of his desk and dashed off a quick note to Claudia, asking about the ban on sex and relationships for their offerings. He wondered whether he should even bother asking Titus. Why should he respond to this message when he hadn't to any others? Finally, though, he pulled out Titus's Velium. "Titus, my newest offering has told me that they are not permitted sexual or romantic intimacy while they live at the temple. Did you order this? It seems unhealthy to me, though Julia will be advising me on that point." He should stop there. He knew he should, but still. "Please write back. We are sailing towards your last known coordinates, and we will be searching for you until either we find you or we are forced to go ashore and resupply. If any elven ships get past Claudia and neither of us is there to catch them, it'll be your own damn fault. Please write back. Your brother, Antony." After putting his box away, Antony was back to his fruitless fretting. What was wrong with him? Hanyu tumbled back through the door after what seemed like 10 hours rather than 4. Antony was so grateful for the distraction from his own useless thoughts, and so relieved to see his offering safely returned, that he had to suppress a brief, ridiculous urge to hug him. "It's so beautiful today," the boy enthused, flopping down onto the sofa and grinning shyly at him, probably waiting to see if he'd be scolded for not bowing. Antony had been telling the truth when he said he couldn't care less about the bowing. He flopped down onto the other side of the sofa, savoring the sweet relaxation that his relief afforded him. "How are the others?" he asked, sure that this would save him from speaking for a few minutes. It did. Hanyu told him an astonishing story about Theodora's new woman. Well, he'd warned her that the creature might be a danger to her other pets, and she clearly had the situation well in hand. Antony wouldn't dare to tell her "I told you so," nor would he worry too much on her behalf. Hanyu's supper arrived, and he kept talking between bites. Antony watched his throat move with his swallows and supposed he'd need to drink from the boy again soon, either today or tomorrow. Tomorrow. He was enjoying himself too much. Damn it, when had this constant stream of chatter become entertaining? And Jen said he's almost sure Lord Iovito will be requesting him once he's allowed to leave the servants' quarters for sex, Hanyu went on. He says that they always drink from him when they go down to feed, and they sit and talk with him afterwards. He hopes that they'll accept his service once the new groups of offerings arrives. It's only been 2 weeks, Antony couldn't help pointing out. You're the new group of offerings. Hanyu laughed. Only 2 weeks. I feel like I've been here much longer. Oh no, was he suffering? Was he unhappy? Perhaps he was homesick. Fuck, what was Antony supposed to do about it if he was homesick? Maybe he just wanted more time out of Antony's quarters? Maybe he didn't like being painted? Maybe... I'm so comfortable with you. It seems we've known each other for months, the boy continued merrily. If that's not disrespectful to say, my lord. It probably is, isn't it? Once again, Antony was engulfed in a tidal wave of relief. I wouldn't know, he managed. I suppose Asao could tell us. Hanyu's face fell at the mention of Asao. It was such a stark contrast to his usual reaction that Antony felt his stomach twist in alarm again. Was the boy still angry that he'd thought he and Asao might have had a history together? Antony, Hanyu spoke falteringly, and Antony fixed his attention on the boy's words. Asao I don't think he's well. Really? Of course the poor creature had been having a bad time, but Antony still hoped that the last few days had been easier on him since Marcus had had the chance to purge his sadism a bit. I'm worried that Lord Marcus might be using him a little too roughly, Hanyu said hesitantly. I know Asao belongs to him, and I don't want to overstep, but, well, he was so rough with you. He knows I can take it, Antony assured him. He wouldn't subject Asao to the things he did to me. Hanyu glanced over at him, smiling a little. Asao, he said you sent him away before you and Lord Marcus went to bed. That was kind of you. To Antony's horror, he found himself lost for words, and he sputtered for a moment before managing to say, I wasn't being kind. I simply don't enjoy being watched. Of course, my lord. Hanyu bent his head demurely, but Antony suspected that his offering was laughing at him. It was far too late for any kind of thundering display like he'd planned after the first time Hanyu had laughed at him. He was saved by a loud toll from the bells announcing that the sun had set. Antony jolted to his feet. I'm going above deck, he growled. Don't wait up for me. Once he was in the hallway, he shook off thoughts of his offering, who was ensconced safely in his rooms and needed no further attention. He had a mission for the night. He needed to see Marcus. He knew from years of experience that if he put it off too long, he would just let the nerves and resentment build until he didn't even want to share an ocean with his lover, let alone a ship or a bed. And that was no good. Best to get it over with. Still, he felt it would be best to see him above deck, not in either of their rooms where Asao and Hanyu would be likely to get involved. Involved in what? He was being paranoid. Marcus was his lover, and yes, he had a temper, but Antony had given him what he wanted. There would be no problems. Still, better to keep the humans clear. Just in case.